Welcome to today's episode of Soap Thing Thoughts. Joining me today is Sebastian of Top Notes. Welcome to the project and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Benjamin.
So tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? And we understand that you are quite passionate about fragrances. Tell us how that got started. How did that come to be?
Totally, totally. Yeah. So originally I'm from California. Right now I'm living out of Seattle. And I work as a physical therapist by day, and then I guess by night, kind of a Batman thing. On my weekends, I'll be doing, my YouTube channel where I talk about fragrances and new fragrances that recently come out. And then I talk about perfumery too, because I do make some of my own fragrances, and I've been doing that for maybe 5 or so years.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, so I mean, it's been a journey. I'm sure it's been a journey too with you with with the shaving cosmetics side of things. But I guess the way I got started was a long time ago. From some way or another, I had heard that having your own signature scent was really important at kind of building your persona. And this was kind of a coming of age story. I was maybe 20 years old and kind of figuring out who I was. I was in undergrad and I started this journey to find my signature scent. And you know how that goes. You get one and then you're like, oh, but this one's got something so great about it. And then you're like,
Right.
oh, but the scent of this one. So yeah, it all began there. And then now I like to collect fragrances. And eventually, I just started saying to myself, hey, well, why can't I just film my unboxing anytime I get a new one? Might as well make a YouTube channel out of it and let you guys know what I think of each one that I get. So yeah,
Right.
that's kind of how it all began.
That's great stuff. So Sebastian here is a fragrance reviewer, more or less, on YouTube. For those who don't know what I do, my name is Ben. I am the Soap Thing, and my YouTube channel is the review of shaving related products, shaving soap, shaving brushes, aftershaves, razors. The reason I invited you on here is because our hobbies are not so different. Both of our hobbies involve the over examining, over explaining, overplaying of smells, fragrances, right? So, uh, one of the things I wanted to sort of break open the conversation with is, have you ever smelled something and it was instantly recognizable? Like, I know I've smelled this before, but I can't for the life of me understand why or where I smelled it last.
100%, 100%. It's so crazy. Yeah, just so connected with memory, our sense of smell. And then it just brings you straight back to somewhere. And
Right.
you've smelled it before. Totally. Yeah, it's a crazy experience, huh?
One example that I have is I stumbled across this recently. This is Sung Om,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Alfred Sung, and
Yep.
I smelled it and immediately was like, I know I've smelled this before, but it's been a very, very long time. And I sat on it for a while and I was like, where have I smelled this? Well, finally, I was talking to my dad and I asked, hey, did you ever wear this? Because it came out the year I was born.
Hmm.
And he looked at me, he's like, yeah, I did. It was pretty popular back then. Why do you ask? And I was like, because I remember it from when I was like, 4 or 5 years old. So it's crazy how scents can be very compelling memories. Do you have a specific example off the top of your head of when that's happened to you?
Well, so I have an example for later when we check out the fragrances. Also, I brought in a fragrance chemical that brought me back to a certain fragrance. But I will say I was recently trying. I think it was Prada L'Homme. Yeah, it was the recent Prada L'Homme. And I smelled that orris, that really strong orris root note in it. And for
Hmm.
some reason or another, and it's like you said, sometimes you don't even know what the memory is coming from, but it reminded me of my beach house that we used to go to in Monterey. But it'll
Hmm.
be so specific, and I'm sure you guys watching have noticed the same kind of thing before where you smell something and you're like, whoa, I definitely know that, that smell. So yeah, it happens all the time, especially well now that I do perfumery, you smell an ingredient and it's like I've been smelling that my whole life, and I didn't even know I was smelling some specific chemical.
Yeah. Uh, lavender is really big that way for me. Like, how many people have smelled Drakkar Noir and didn't even know it? And then years later, when they're curious, they spray it and they're like, a lot of things make sense now. So,
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
um, one of the ways our hobbies kind of cross paths is the use of a recognizable scents in shaving soap. Like I have an example right here. This is from 345 Soap Company out of Colorado. This is called Tight Lines. And I don't think the artwork does it any good, but this is a Creed Aventus duped scent. It literally, they take a duplicate scent oil and they
Right.
basically put Creed Aventus here. Now, with a caveat, especially with the expensive fragrances, like so for example, when they take scent oils that are designed to make candles, basically, and they use them to make hot process shaving soap. And so when you're smelling a Creed Aventus shaving soap, it's going to smell more like Club de Nuit Intense Man. You're going to notice that
Sure.
it's not quite up to the quality of like a $400 fragrance, but it still is a very, very close copy. So I think at a certain point, I think in the late 2000s, oh 07, oh 08, oh 09, and 2010, especially after Creed Aventus came out, there was this push in artisan soap making where people, small businesses make it to push stuff out into the market that was the same scent as stuff that people really recognize. Another one is this is Haverford from Sterling, and this is Tom Ford Tobacco Vanille. So,
No way.
yep. And most, for the most part, the scents you can find in shaving soaps are some more common ones
Sure.
like everybody's doing, you know, a lot of Creed scents, a lot of everybody's doing Dior Sauvage and Bleu de Chanel and that sort of thing. One of the other things I think is really compelling about what's going on in the shaving hobby right now is their ability to bring back scents that have been discontinued. Like right here, here's an aftershave. Uh, this is from Fine Accoutrements. It's called American Blend, and this is straight up Rive Gauche Pour Homme from Yves Saint Laurent. And so if you want to smell that scent, you either have to get a vintage bottle, which is going to be insanely expensive, or you
Yeah,
can get this for about 20 bucks. So,
that's
and you get
sweet.
and you're getting as close to it as you're ever going to. So, but it is worth noting that the fragrance hobby, at least in terms of engagement on social media, is significantly bigger than the shaving hobby. And I think that has a lot to do with like fragrances. You just spray it on, you're out the door, right?
Yeah,
And you have a, it almost becomes part of your personality
sure.
versus
Sure.
shaving is it requires you to engage with it. You actually have to do something. And not so much in Europe, but very much in America, we've gotten to where shaving is just for most people is just like something they hurry up and do it because they have to. And a lot of people, if they don't have to shave, they won't. I mean, I'm active duty military, and so I have to shave every day, and so this hobby makes sense for me. But for a lot of people, I think just being able to pick something on, pull the cap, and spray it, and you're done is significantly more appealing. What are your thoughts on this? I know some of this is a little bit new to you.
Yeah, so no, I would totally agree. It seems like it's people have kind of forgotten the ritual and the experience side of things when it comes to shaving, but you know, it stays alive in your community. And I was looking through some of your videos and through the comments, and everybody engages a lot more, honestly, in the comments with your type of videos than with a lot of the fragrance videos, because it seems like you guys are kind of a tight-knit community. Um, because yeah, sometimes my audience it reaches out to people who aren't even really part of a fragrance collecting kind of thing. It's just everyone owns one, you know. And I think it's like you said, it's just so easy. You just pop off the cap and then, you know, spray something on. Um, but yeah, that is interesting. And you know, something else that's funny, I noticed when I watched one of your videos, I saw that some of those companies, you know, like Salvatore Ferragamo, I saw you had the Uomo, and that's involved in the same exact things. You know, they'll
Right.
make the same scent for the shaving cream versus the spray cologne. So
One of the things that's interesting about shaving soaps, aftershaves don't have this problem, but shaving soaps do. Shaving soaps are very one-dimensional because
Oh,
it's
really?
not a liquid medium for carrying a scent. It's a solid, more or less.
Right.
And so we're all familiar with how fragrances will have an opening and then a mid and then a dry down. And
Hmm.
it has this like evolution, sometimes in a more linear way, but it still evolves versus
Totally.
like a shaving soap. For example, is Creed Aventus. I'm smelling the opening, the mid, and the dry down all at once.
Right.
It still very much smells like Creed Aventus, but it's a bit more hodgepodgey. I hate to downplay it and poorly advertise it to whoever's watching, but it is important to understand like this process is not easy to get a scent oil to work in a hot process soap. A lot of times, artisans have talked to me about it just kind of flashing off. It won't stay anchored to the scent, and you'll open it up in testing a few days or weeks later, and the scent is just gone. And so
100%.
they have to be really careful how they add the fragrance to the soap and how they make it.
Totally. No,
And
I've noticed the same thing with candle applications. I haven't done shaving soaps yet. But I've done shampoos and lotions and I've tried candles. It's tough, man. It's like you said, sometimes it just won't combine. And I know there's some sites, you can look up whatever chemical you're using, whatever aroma chemical or natural that you're using and see how strong it connects for soap applications or for whatever applications. But it seems like most of them, it says candles, it's weak, or a lot of the more solid stuff, it's harder to combine.
right. Yeah, I've never tried candles. I'll have to give that a whirl because I remember making them at summer camp. You'd have this like two vats on the table and you go around in a circle and do it. I'm sure some of us remember that, where you would dip it in the wax and then you would dip it in cold water to dry it and you go around in a circle, just around and around, and eventually it would be this big old gob.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah.
One of the other things that's interesting, and then we'll move out of shaving and into to fragrances, is every once in a while they will some artisan will make something that's just silly. I think in some ways we've taken the scent dupe engagement a little too far. Here's one that is from Phoenix Artisan Accoutrements. This is Aloha Smackdown.
Oh my gosh.
Well, this is obviously a dupe of Hawaiian Punch. I'm not sure why you'd want to smell like that, but apparently people like it because it comes out every summer and it sells like hotcakes. So,
Really?
and if you're trying to get something that's a little simpler, maybe I guess what I would call an original is, there are things like everybody's heard of Taylorville Bond Street. They've seen them on Amazon and things like that. Well, here's just a grapefruit scent. So not everything is a scent dupe. Some artisans like will make stuff that's like has more nuance to it. Like here's a tea scent. This is chaotic neutral from Declaration Grooming.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of creativity in here, but it does seem lately like it used to be that the overwhelming majority of new scents that came out in shaving soaps were originals. They were not at least not trying to be based on anything in particular. But once these soap makers discovered that they could make a lot more money bringing in more recognizable stuff, that seems to be the trend these days. You can still find original stuff that was like a just a creative creation, but a lot of times we we're seeing a lot of the same scents come out from artisans, and it's inspired by something. Sometimes you'll luck out and it'll be one that's really interesting. Like I remember Sterling did one that was Azaro Chrome. That's never been done in a soap before. Well, they did it on a limited run, and it was up for a while, and now it's gone. So it's I think the shaving hobby has the same issue with stuff being discontinued as the fragrance hobby does. Um, let's transition a little bit.
Sure.
What are some fragrances that you've been impressed by most recently? Like stuff you bought in the last year that you probably knew you would like, but you smelled it and you were like, whoa, I didn't think I would like it that much.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think most recently, I've been kind of diving into the Middle Eastern fragrances, and
All
not
right.
just the clone houses, like Latafa, those kind of clone houses. Um, Although recently I got Kamra, that one that's a seemingly a clone of Killian's Angel Share. That one was very impressive. And honestly, it's like you said, how these clone companies or the clone scents are kind of making a recent rise. I've seen the same thing with the fragrance community. People are starting to realize how important these clones are because you can get something that's it's not as good usually, but sometimes it's almost just as good for a fraction of the price. So it's not like some of these niche fragrances or these expensive fragrances are out of touch anymore, which is crazy because, growing up, I thought, okay, I'm never going to be able to get Creed Aventus or I'm never going to be able to smell even close to Creed Aventus, that kind of a thing.
Right.
So really, a lot of these clone houses have been impressing me lately, just with even the quality of presentation.
No, you make a good point, and a light bulb went off inside my head when you said that because my personal favorite, I don't know if it's my personal favorite scent, but by far one of the most impressive scents I've ever smelled was Creed Silver Mountain Water. That was a very surprising scent to me. And shaving soap makers seem to be able to do that one pretty well. Uh,
Hmm.
some scents will lend better to hot process soap making than others, and Creed Silver Mountain Water seems to do very well when you put it into a shaving soap. Like I remember I got a it was a smaller bottle of Silver Mountain Water. I can't remember if it was a 1.7. I don't remember if that's how they do it or not, but it was a while ago.
Sure.
And I opened the bottle and I smelled it, and I smelled a shaving soap that was based on it, and it was practically identical.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
to your point, it used to be that these clone fragrance houses were viewed as a bit of a joke. Like
Right.
they would come out and they were very disappointing. And then I think Armaf was the brand that turned that on its head because they
Hmm.
were doing Milestone, Millesime Imperial, and then they were doing a Club de Nuit Intense Man, and then Sillage, and every time they would do one, would get better and better and better at it. So
Hmm.
it it does make one worry that maybe we're undermining these legacy brands, but at the same time, some of them are just unjustifiably expensive. Like it's not like Dolce and Gabbana where you can get them pretty cheap on like Fragrance Net. Some of these fragrances are three, four, five, six, $700, and so the overwhelming majority of people are going to say no to that and go to something like Armaf to get basically the same thing.
Totally. Totally. No, 100%. Yeah, it seems like Armoff kind of paved the way and, they walked so the other ones could kind of run. I think Club de Nuit Intense Man was actually my first fragrance clone that I ever bought. So I mean, and you see it in all those rankings today in videos, where people will be talking about best fragrance clones of all time. It's still up there, huh?
Yeah, because they put in the effort. They were
Yeah.
like, let's actually try instead of pushing off something that's basically a ripoff. Because some of the old
Totally.
ones were like, ooh, that's bad. But
Yeah,
Club de
yeah.
Nuit Intense Man came along and it was really good stuff. One of the ones I bought recently, because I'm currently stationed out here in Turkey, and so I visited the Mediterranean Sea a lot.
Sure.
Mancera's Wave Musk.
Oh, Mancera, yes.
So
You've been getting a lot of hype lately, huh? How is that one?
if you're gonna go to the beach, this is the fragrance to wear. This one's all tart fruit and seaweed and musk, and it's really quite compelling. The reason this surprised me a lot is because I had gotten a couple of Manceras that were just like, no, like big mistake on my part. Should have known better. And then this was the third one. Third time's the charm. I picked this one up, and it was just like, oh my god, this smells amazing. Uh, even like Cedrat Boise, I thought, I don't get what all the hype is about.
Yeah.
But Wave Musk was just like, whoa. Like, so every time I went on vacation, I've actually made some sentimental memories with this. Every time I went on vacation out here to go scuba diving or to go sightseeing out in the Mediterranean, I had to bring this. Like, this is definitely a compelling scent, big surprise. You were talking about Middle Eastern fragrances, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, one of the things I noticed is that you remember this Dolce or Versace Oud Noir?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the
So,
only Versace one that I don't own.
So you can still get it. It is still available on FragranceNet. A lot of big fragrance reviewers, like the big time channels,
Sure.
were talking about how it was discontinued. I don't think that's true. I think
Totally.
when a lot of especially American channels come out and say this is discontinued, it's really interesting because this is a new batch code. It was made last year. Well, this was
Uh,
supposedly supposed to have been discontinued like 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
right.
Uh, what actually happened was it was released in America briefly during the big oud rush right before blue fragrances came out.
Mm-hmm.
And or no, I think blue fragrances came first, and then there was this intermittence where everybody was buying like oud fragrances. And so that's when like you had like Boss bottled oud and things like that.
Right. Right.
And then it left American shelves. Well, they didn't stop making it in Europe because like here in Turkey, I can go into a Sephora and still pick this up.
Oh, easy peasy.
Like
Okay.
when I was in London, I went to a Sephora over there and I got Chanel Antaeus, which was crazy. Uh, so like I think in Europe, there's a lot of fragrances that we don't have that they do. Like I can still get Yves Saint Laurent Coros off the shelf. It's discontinued in the US, but not in Europe. And so it's
Right.
really weird how there's this extreme variation of what's available versus not available in certain countries.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, I did a video recently on some of the fragrances that I picked up on my recent Europe trip. I went to Czech Republic. And
Ooh,
it's like you said, I found a bunch of Avon fragrances. And I was like, what? Avon hasn't made fragrances in forever. But apparently they're still pushing them out. It's just not on our shelves. It's just not on US shelves, I guess. So there was a lot of fragrances that I tried to even link in my descriptions, for people to buy, and they just can't get them in the US. So I ended up not being able to send, put up links for them. It's very interesting.
yeah, that sucks. It that you had to experience that and they didn't. I've seen a lot of vintage Avon fragrances that you can get, but I didn't know they were still making them. That's news to me. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so yeah, this is some of the stuff that I think has really impressed me lately. Let me ask you another question. What do you think are some fragrances that let me just give you a funny scenario. If your house was burning down, you can only grab two or three. What would you grab?
Oh man. See, this is going to show a little bit of my personality. I'll probably grab the expensive ones. So I'm thinking, like some of the more expensive designer ones like Bleu de Chanel. I've got one of the Xerjoff ones, so I'd be grabbing Xerjoff, just the expensive stuff,
Right.
because then I can rebuild from there. But I probably would bring some of my more, personal ones that bring back memories, like the one that I brought in today, actually, Cool Water. I would
Oh,
probably bring Cool Water. That was my first fragrance that I ever bought, and so that's kind of has a little more sentimental value, you know.
Cool Water is interesting. There's been conversations going around about the person who made Cool Water was the same perfumer that made Green Irish Tweed earlier.
Yep. Yeah, same guy, same nose. Yep. So
So
it makes you think.
yeah, it does make you think. Apparently, L'Eau de Say Pour Homme was
Mhm.
originally supposed to be Creed Silver Mountain Water's scent, but they hired a different perfumer, and so L'Eau de Say Pour Homme now smells like what it smells like. And the perfumer who created Silver Mountain Water went over to Creed, and they made it, which is interesting. There's a whole book about it. I'd have to look it up, but Yeah, it's crazy how it's almost like whenever a new fragrance is about to come out, it's crazy how what happens behind the scenes. Like there's almost like this bidding process for who's going to do the scent and what the scent is going to be. It's
Totally.
kind of crazy how that happens.
Totally. Yeah, it's like you hear in the media about like, oh, this was Justin Bieber wrote this song and then he didn't want it. And then this guy sang it instead. Same kind of thing, huh? It's a little bit of that marketing. But that makes sense. I mean, sometimes I'll make a fragrance and it won't be what I want, but it's real good. And so you leave it on the, you put it away for a little bit. So I'm sure these guys, these artisans, they make something real great and the company doesn't want it. And they're like, but I'll keep it just in case.
Right.
So I can make a sale later on.
It's interesting. You said you've created fragrances. Obviously, I don't want you to reveal trade secrets, but can you give us a vague representation of what kind of goes into that? Like, is it easier or harder than people might expect?
Well, so when I first got, so, I first started collecting fragrances, and I'm sure you've come across a point where you're like, wow, this is kind of adding up, buying all the shaving ingredients or buying all the fragrance, the fragrances. It adds up. It's a lot of money. So I thought, hey, well, it would probably be cheaper if I just started making them myself. And I was wrong, but it ended up being a fun journey. So I thought it was going to be, pretty simple. Look up some key ingredients that are used in fragrances and just throw them together. But it ended up, I went down that rabbit hole. Now I have a couple of hundred different chemicals that are used in fragrances, and it takes several years before you start making something that resembles the stuff that you see on the shelves.
Right. I've had
It really
conversations
does.
with other people where they're just like when you go into a professional fragrance house, it's almost like when you go into where they actually make the stuff, it's almost like a science lab.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, and a lot of people don't even realize, they think, Hugo Boss made this fragrance, but unless it's Chanel or what are the other company, Hermes, the ones that have like an in-house perfumer, it's all just some chemical company like Givaudan or Firmenich or like those major chemical companies that make these fragrance ingredients, and they're always trying to push the boundaries, adding new, functional groups onto each chemical formula to create new scents, new scent molecules. They're the ones that are actually making the fragrances, and then they ship it off to whoever for production and then putting on the labels and stuff like that. But it's not like Yves Saint Laurent is making the fragrances. So
Right.
yeah,
No.
it's a whole big, yeah, it's like a chemistry lab. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like it's kind of like the way cars are made. Not to deviate too much from our topic of conversation, but like Ford doesn't actually make their cars. All the parts are made by, Lear Corporation and United Technologies and things like that. And then they get sent to Ford who puts them together. So,
Totally.
um, I just thought of this. So before I move on, yeah, it's kind of, I don't think people realize how complex it is to try to make a fragrance. Like whenever you go to Fragrantica or like Parfumo, and you look at the list of scent notes, you always find
Mhm.
like some of the, especially some of the older fragrances will have like
Oh yeah.
castoreum and civet and oak moss and cedarwood and lavender, and you're just like, okay, how much of that is BS?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Like 50 notes too. Those old ones, those old
yeah,
school fragrances, they had like 50 notes, huh?
yeah, and your logical question is, okay, how much of that is just they're just taking that straight out of their behind, like
Yeah.
because like I don't know. It kind of makes one wonder. Like, is there like little vials, like hundreds of thousands of them, and one says lavender, the other one says oak moss, or somebody told me that to make a lavender fragrance note, it actually takes like several other chemicals to put them together to make something that smells like lavender.
Yeah. Usually, and that's it. So, lavender specifically, if you want to talk lavender, that's mostly linalool. And then you can use dihydromercenol. So yeah, so different synthetic aroma chemicals because it's way cheaper than getting this heavy, kind of natural smelling lavender. You can use the essential oil, but again, the essential oil has maybe 20 different chemicals inside it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and then it ends up smelling something like, the soaps that you have at the Saturday markets where it's a little bit heavier smelling, a little more essential oil smelling.
Right.
It's exactly, you're right on hit it right on the head with that one. It's a lot of synthetic chemicals.
Have you ever walked by somebody wearing a fragrance and you're just like, that is not you? Like, I don't know what you did, but that is not you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well,
I've
in the new ones now, I'm sure you probably walk by people smelling, everybody's got Dior Sauvage, right? Everybody's got, what's the other one? Baccarat Rouge, or some sort of clone of it. And it's like, okay, well, they picked the first thing, so
right.
totally.
And then, well, some like I guess I'm a bigger example of that because I'll walk by somebody wearing Chanel Antaeus and like I've walked by people at work and they go nice, like they just like they give me a thumbs up, like that's a daring thing to wear, but I like it. And then other times I'll be wearing it and people will walk by and they'll just give me this like what the hell did I just
Totally.
smell? So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
uh, well, I suppose let's start to bring this to a close. Let me ask you this. You alluded to this earlier. So you said a fragrance could be in some ways indicative of a certain person's personality, right?
Sure, yeah.
So what would you when you walk by somebody and you smell what they're wearing, what would you say that says about their personality? Like if you have examples like, okay, if they wear this, obviously this isn't fair, but my first thought is, well, they must be this kind of person.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, well, usually when I walk by somebody and without looking at them, if I smell something super overly kind of sickly sweet or a lot of that vanillin and ethyl vanillin, just one of those vanilla bombs, that kind of thing, I think of that as more of a youthful scent. So usually I think of them as, a little bit more playful, immature, maybe younger. And yeah, usually if I smell something that has a lot of the musks, like old school musks, like the nitro musks and musk ketones, or a lot of that lavender, some of the, like chamomile, carnation, some of those fragrance notes that are a little more old school, then I think of them as kind of older and a little bit more, kind of tougher. Same thing with kind of some of the leather notes, the animalic notes. I think of those as more kind of badass notes.
Yeah.
Um, so there's definitely, yeah, certain personas that are kind of attributed. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, for me, I think fragrances, depending on how you wear them, can be so compelling that your attire almost has to reflect what you're wearing.
Totally.
So like for example, if somebody is wearing Tom Ford ombre leather, which is, in my opinion, is a phenomenal scent, legendary scent,
Oh yeah.
and they're not dressed in a way that reflects the nature of the fragrance, then it's almost off-putting. I've worn Chanel Platinum Egoiste a lot,
Sure. Yeah.
and in my opinion, that is a very dress up scent. Well,
Totally.
I've worn it around when I'm not dressed up for it, and I've had people straight up say that smells great, but it smells really out of place. So,
Right.
uh, so I think, in my personal opinion, I think I don't. Whenever I walk by and I smell somebody, the next thing I do is look at them, because I'm just curious. Like, does the fragrance match the person?
Totally.
And I early on in my sort of journey of smelling things, which I've been doing for years, I assumed that a lot of people were going to be walking around in poor taste when it comes to fragrance. And what I discovered is that that really isn't the case. Somehow, most people instinctively know what they're doing,
Yeah. They
uh,
figured it out.
especially if these people only have like five fragrances to their name. They kind of know, okay, let's not wear Tom Ford ombre leather unless we're actually going to be wearing leather, because otherwise it's going to smell weird. Uh,
Right.
or or maybe some kind of darker attire, like you're going to a club. That would be a good function to wear ombre leather or a dark suit. Uh, same thing for me. Like I can't put on Platinum Ego East and then put on my workout clothes because it's just going to smell weird once you have the context of the whole picture of that person.
Sure.
So I think that's how, to me, that's how fragrance speaks to personality. Uh, that is that's my opinion on how on the significance of fragrance itself, and it does bring up an interesting question of how is this possible that we have such a tremendous group of people that are interested in fragrances. Like some of these YouTube channels have like 200, 300,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
Uh, I think people are trying to, in maybe, and this doesn't have to be like a grand movement from how things used to be, but I think people are slowly starting to ask themselves, what am I? What represents me? And
Hmm.
so fragrance is one way to do that.
Totally. No, 100%. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, it's like you said, people are starting to figure out that it's kind of an extension of their personality and it's innate, it's pretty easy for them to figure it out, to get it right, for certain situations, or even depending on the weather, right? So if it's like summer or spring, people usually figure that out. I haven't had a whole lot of, ombre leathers in the heat of summer. I haven't had a whole lot of that because it doesn't smell good. And then they realize,
Yeah. Yeah,
they
don't do
figured
that.
it.
uh
So,
um in we've talked about the fragrance side of shaving. I'm going to touch on one little bit of that before we go. If anybody's watching this and they're interested in giving, the shaving hobby a try because, they have a scent that they fell in love with and they're like, I think I can find a shaving soap that smells like that. I urge you to be careful because if you think collecting fragrances is addicting, oh boy, like you better stop right there because collecting razors and brushes and shaving soaps because it's something to interact with. Like when I hold a shaving brush, it's tangible. It's like I'm rubbing it against my face and it's an interaction. And so I would say if people are going to dip their toes into the shaving side of this, I would find something that everybody says is perfectly good to go as far as like razors and just stop right there because too many people get into the shaving side of it. And next thing they know, they got 250 soaps and they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this?
definitely.
So,
So are there different situations? You know how let's say you wear ombre leather when you're doing a night out or something, you're wearing a leather jacket. Are there different situations where you would use different soaps? Is it the same kind of way with the shaving community?
not necessarily because well, let me put it to you this way. You wouldn't want to use a very fruity shaving soap and then put on a very woody fragrance because at least for a short period, you're going to smell both of those at once, and there's just going to be conflicting scents. Uh,
Totally.
I wouldn't say people need to worry too much about that because unless you get an extremely fragrant shaving soap and aftershave, that scent is going to dissipate off the surface of your skin, and you're going to be left with whatever you sprayed on that was made by the pros, and that's still going to be lingering because it's built to do that. Uh,
Right.
it's built to stay attached to your skin, attached to your clothes, and be fragrant and radiate fragrance for hours at a time. An aftershave is not designed to do that. Like we've all heard of like different grades of like fragrances. There's like eau de cologne.
Hmm.
So aftershave is like around the concentration of like an eau de cologne, maybe even slightly less.
Yeah.
And then you have like eau de toilette, eau de parfum, parfum, extrait de parfum, and things like that. So that's the reason why, more or less, it doesn't necessarily matter because the aftershave is going to be gone off your face, uh, scent wise, a lot quicker than your fragrance is going to be. I
Sure.
still wouldn't wear something that's like wildly different from what you're going to spray on. Like if you're somebody who like shaves with something like this and then puts a fragrance on, my advice is to use a woody scented shaving soap, like Perezzo Red, that's just straight sandalwood. And then I think you're perfectly fine to use an oud scented fragrance.
Sure.
or some or a sandalwood forward fragrance. That's perfectly fine. But I most definitely would not have something. I wouldn't do like polar opposites. I wouldn't shave with something that's really bright and then wear a fragrance that's very dark and rich because it's just gonna somebody's gonna walk by you and smell both of those together and be like, what in the world is going on? But I only think you really have that to worry about for like 2 or 3 hours. After that, I think your fragrance is going to drown out your shaving soap, more or less.
Right. Right. No, that makes sense. Definitely.
Well, I suppose it is time to do the frag out. Now, when I initially started this podcast series, I was dealing with a lot of shavers, and we would do a frag out at the end of the video. Somewhere during the process of me doing these podcasts, we stopped. But in your case, I don't see how we can avoid it. So
Totally.
let's spray something on and let's talk about it. What have you got?
So I've got Davidoff Cool Water. We all know it. We all love it. Great fragrance. This was my first fragrance ever. And it's like Benjamin said, it was made by the same person that made Creed Green Irish Tweed. And most people will agree it smells quite similar for a fraction of the price. So great fragrance. I'm gonna spray this bad boy on.
Still a great performer even today. It has not been reformulated down that much.
Totally.
So I'm gonna do one that I got last year and was extremely impressed by it. It's Dune Pour Homme from Dior.
Oh,
So this is a dry, woody, green, musky scent that also has a very interesting fig component to it. It's really interesting. So uh, this scent, you remember Dolce and Gabbana Light Blue?
yes. Yeah, yeah.
So in concept, this is kind of the same thing. So Dolce and Gabbana Light Blue came out first as a women's fragrance, and then years later they released Dolce and Gabbana Light Blue Pour Homme, which is the men's version. And so this is the same concept. It's not the same scent, but it's the same concept. It is a masculinized version of the women's fragrance that came out much earlier.
Gotcha. So
This is from
when did this one
19
come out?
this is from 1997, the men's version.
Gotcha.
The
Gotcha.
the uh the women's version is like 92, 93, something like that. So
Yeah.
but I when I first sprayed it on, this is why people need to, and I'll ask you the same question. I normally ask people at the end of every video, what have you learned from shaving you can pass on to other people? Uh, I'll ask you, I'll give you time to think about this one. What can you tell us about fragrances? Good advice about, wearing fragrances and collecting them that other people might take as good advice. The advice I'll give is when you smell something for the first time, just once, and you don't like it, set it down, walk away, come back a while later. Because if I had just tossed this, threw it away the first time I smelled it, because I did not like this when I first smelled it, but the more I bought it and well, not bought it, I bought it once, obviously, but the more I used it and wore it, smelled it, I was just like, you know what? I get it. I get what it's trying to be. And I think it needed to grow on me. And now I really like it. And anytime I wear it, I get compliments up, down, and sideways. It's kind of crazy for this one because it's like nobody really knows this is a thing. Like obviously everybody didn't forget about it or it wouldn't still be made, but this is kind of a
Right.
sleeper that people have forgotten about.
Totally. No, I think that's great advice. I mean, really, yeah, there's so many fragrances that can grow on you. I'm sure it's the same way with the shave soaps, maybe you try it one time and you're like, it didn't feel right, and then you try it again and it's definitely. I guess my advice would be buy small bottles if you're going to become a collector. I used to be always buying those 3.3, the ounce ones. I will never run out of fragrance in
Right.
any, I'm never going to run out of juice in any of them. And then kind of being minimalist with it. And then I used to do a lot of blind buys,
Hmm.
which I still do. I still blind buy fragrances. But I started buying the samples from like Scent Split or Decant. I don't know if you've ever bought from one of those.
I still buy a lot from Decant X. I think their packaging and what they do is really compelling.
Totally. Yeah, no, that's another great one. Yeah, because then you can try before you buy, before you drop $60 or something like that. So really, it does add up. Well, like Benjamin was saying, these hobbies add up.
Um, what he's talking about before we get out of here is there is an industry standard for sizes. So for example, this Dior Dune Pour Homme, this is I think it's a 3.4 ounce bottle versus like this Chanel Platinum Egoist, which is a 1.7 ounce bottle. So the only time I would encourage people to get the larger size is if you're already buying an expensive fragrance and the larger one, like on FragranceNet, is only like 10 or 15 bucks more. Then you may as well just get all the juice. But if there's a significant price difference, our recommendation is to get a smaller bottle.
Totally, totally well said.
Well, Sebastian, I want to thank you very much for coming on to the project and talking about this hobby that in some ways we are both very passionate about. I will go ahead and put all of Sebastian's information in the description of the video. So hopefully YouTube doesn't decide to put the video on the bottom and the description up there. Otherwise, this is going to be awkward. Uh, so thank you very much for coming, and I appreciate you joining me today. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, everybody, I want to thank everybody for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Questions, comments, put them in the comments section. This is Soap Thing telling everybody, shave like you mean it. Thanks for watching.